Hello, everyone, and welcome back from lunch. We got a great panel here, and today we're going to be talking about energy management and the demand for that. And I'd like to start off by thanking our sponsors again for your generous support. We couldn't put on a summit like this without you. For today, we're going to be talking a lot about energy management highlighted by Schneider Electric, and we're talking about the demand for energy management home. Afterwards, we'll have a networking break, and then we'll talk about multifamily with my colleague, Kristen. So to start off with, I want to talk about the great energy squeeze. American consumers have been used to lower electricity rates than the rest of the world for many years. But over the last 5 years, we started to see an increase in energy, so much so that 2/3 of internet households in our data say that their costs are too high. And no one, not even the wealthy, are exempt from this. Only 12% say that costs are not enough to make them concerned. And 1/3 are actively working to reduce their, or want to reduce their energy consumption at home, but don't know how. And we think that devices are a good way for people to manage their energy. We're starting to see the possibility of different energy management devices that can be set to work together and be turned back to save energy when costs are too high. And we have asked in our research whether people have integrations with their smart devices into routines. 40% say that they do. And we find that energy management is the primary routine type that they are looking to set up. 29% said that they are looking at saving energy through their routines. Now, one thing that's important to note is that one key energy-saving device, smart thermostats, is only at 16% adoption today. So there's definitely a lot more that the industry needs to do to create adoption in those areas so that you can have things like demand response programs that can interact with that and save energy and also reduce the strain on the grid. So to talk more about this, we have my great panel here that's going to be talking about innovations in energy management, the adoption is actually needed, and what's out there today. And we're going to talk also about partnerships and ecosystem players. Is it important to partner with people? Who do you partner with? Exactly what is the process and how do you split the profits? And then future directions in smart energy. What's hot, what's coming up, what should be on our radar for the future. So I have a great panel here with representatives from Duke Energy, Shelly, NRG, Schneider Electric, Resideo, and of course myself, Parks Associates. And we'll be talking a lot about energy management in the home today. To start off with, I wanted to have Lon introduce himself, tell us a little bit about you and what you do at Duke.
Great, well, thanks for having me. And just briefly, Lon Huber, I lead up a lot of our customer solutions. So think all the pricing that a customer sees, the time of use rates, or TOU, as you might hear on this panel, all of our economic development. So that's the data centers as well coming in, as well as manufacturing, our wholesale business, regulatory enablement, customer load analytics. So a lot of the fun things, and the key is figuring out how to orchestrate it all so that we drive value for customers and try to keep their bills as low as possible.
Great. And now Wolfgang, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Wolfgang Kirsch. I'm a CEO of Shelly Group. Shelly is producing smart home devices with a strong focus on energy monitoring, energy saving. We are well known in Europe. We are still at the beginning in the United States, growing 40-50% every year. A French journalist a week ago or 2 weeks ago said we will be a mini Schneider in the future, so looking to my left. And that's a great honor for us. I'm happy to be here.
Great. And now Meghan, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, Meghan McConomy. I am with NRG. I lead the brand strategy for the consumer organization. And so that is our smart home brand, Vivint, but also working with our energy brands in competitive markets. So that's going to be in Texas and the East. My 12 years at NRG, I've had a number of different roles, really focused on energy management. So looking forward to this discussion. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And Poonam, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Poonam Narang, and I lead the product management team at Schneider Electric for the residential segment in North America. And my focus is really all things residential, from breakers to enclosures to panels, across what exists today, as well as how the industry is evolving into newer equipments, as well as energy management.
Great. And now Michael.
All right, Michael Siemann. I lead our energy sciences team at Resideo, as well as direct the technical efforts of our grid services team. The grid services team has been developing demand response and virtual power plant programs for over the last decade. And I'm going to bring like a experience where I have both helping develop the energy management features that millions of customers use to help reduce their energy bills, as well as managing those fleets of virtual power plants for utilities and energy markets.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much to my panel for introducing themselves. I wanted to go ahead and start with the first question. We want to talk a lot about what the role is in energy management platforms, what tech is currently being used and how complicated the integrations are. So I'd like to direct that question to you first, Michael.
All right. So energy management today is kind of shifted from being traditionally about just energy reduction to a point now where it's about how do you shift the energy usage at different times. So either driven by a time of use rate that you might have for electricity, or part of a demand response virtual power plant program. Moving energy from the peak hours to off-peak hours helps reduce strain on the electricity grid. And us at CES here, we know that customers expecting them to do all this stuff on their own, take action, it's not realistic. So we're kind of challenged as technology providers to be able to automate, to put intelligence into these products, so that way it gets it into the right position. And joining platforms is how to do that. Smart thermostats are the gateway kind of energy management product for customers. I mean, there's tens of millions of them out there. As you said, that 16% of them are connect, or that's the number that have been connected. So there's a lot of opportunities to get traditional thermostats connected. But what we see is having this controllable load available for utilities. Customers are able to take control of their energy management, control their bills, and get to a position where they're helping out their community and able to provide multiple value for everyone involved.
Yeah, that's great. And definitely, like I said, our data does show that significant amount of consumers do want to be able to manage their energy, but they just don't know how. And I don't think that we have enough marketing around that and exactly enough education for consumers. But I do know that it's a little bit different in Europe, and I don't know if you could talk a little bit about that, Wolfgang.
Yes, in Europe, energy prices are much higher than they are in the US. I personally paid 45 euro cents last year for my energy per kilowatt hour, which is quite expensive. And then customers automatically start to check where are they consuming their energy, how much are they consuming, and especially with our products, quite affordable. They usually start with one or two devices with a central energy meter. They find out how much their apartment or their house is consuming when they are not at home. They start to ask themselves, where is this coming from? They put simple devices behind a wall switch or a plug in between to figure out what is the next step. And this is how it started. And that took off 2 years ago with the high energy prices like crazy. And now what we see is a boom of solar systems, especially popular in Germany and in other countries are very small systems that people put on their balcony, so-called balcony power stations, that just deliver a small proportion of the energy that they need, and the big systems, of course, as well. And then they as well start to use the energy that they have, find out now the batteries are full, what can I do with the excess of energy? Now I switch on my air condition, now I charge my car. That's similar to the US, but the attention is much higher and it needs less education because they start to ask questions because simply it hurts. 45 euro cent hurts. Now it's a bit down and immediately we feel that as well the attention goes a little bit down. But it has as well to do with how much do I have to pay for such a system and how fast is the amortization time with these low prices. And that's something that really helps. And I think that it has to hurt to a certain degree if we want to change our habits.
Yeah, I think that that's instrumental in the fact that the European market has really adopted a lot of energy technology ahead of like the U.S. market. Even now, like I saw recently, Homey had some release for energy monitoring that's really compatible with European devices, and I was thinking it'd be great to have that here in the U.S. too. I think we'll get there eventually, but yeah. So I wanted to get also a sense of like from Meghan, what do you think the benefits are for consumers, utility companies, and technology providers?
So from a consumer perspective, a part of the approach we do at NRG, but in the competitive market specifically, because it's such a competitive market, lots of competitors, we need to differentiate, is really talk to consumers. What do they want? What do they want out of these energy management companies and offerings? And like Daniel said, savings obviously rises to the top, but another benefit is really around convenience. And so Michael talked about time of use plans specifically, and what we learned was you can talk about time of use and you can talk about shifting energy to consumers, but they don't really know what that means, and it's not convenient for them. And so what we did is we developed products that were easy to understand. This was years ago, like free weekends or free nights. These are time of use products that customers can really understand and take action around to save money. So that was a way to really marry savings and convenience. Another offering that we've got that we just started piloting was really getting some of that technology into the home to make it easy for consumers to save. So installing thermostats for free, but also including doorbell cameras, and so bundling that for energy customers. And we've started to see some traction there, and we're excited about kind of how that adoption is really starting to move forward as a result.
Yeah, that's very great. It's like the bundling thing is very interesting too, because that does create a bit more value for the consumers and helps get them on board. So I want to talk, to Lon about providing sort of examples of some of these short-term and long-term energy savings achieved through a home energy management system.
Well, it gets into the patchwork of the electricity sector, which is a very complicated industry, needs a translation to the end consumer in a lot of different ways. But you heard about competitive markets, there's regulated markets, there's public, there's co-ops. Sometimes a state will have a mix of all four within it. And so each of those models presents different types of value propositions to the customer. So maybe at the front end, you could see an upfront incentive if the customer buys a device or enrolls a device. So that's upfront. Maybe it's a bill credit or another way to do it. And then there's longer term savings where maybe it's the rate optimization. So time of use rate optimization with that device, and then ongoing credits for enrollment. Or it's a aggregation of customer resources and it pulls some revenue in from the wholesale market, which is more of a similar to a European style transaction. So there's all different ways that these value streams can reach a consumer. And then to make matters even more complicated, it also depends on what portion of the grid you're providing value to. So if you're providing value to power plants that are centralized versus the wires that are in your neighborhood, those are two different systems and two different types of value streams that you can get from them. And so you could see in some markets you get a program for the wires and you get another program for the generator, right? And how those interface could be different. So not to make it overly complex, but there's a variety of different value streams. Some are upfront, some are ongoing, some are fixed, some are variable.
Yeah, thank you for that, Lon. Yeah, I think it's really interesting too that with like the bill credit, our research finds that incentives are an appealing reason for like demand response participation, and that for 80% it's appealing to have a bill credit. So it's really important to have an incentive that really brings that home for consumers, but it does have to be enough for consumers to participate and get over the hump of not wanting to lose control of their devices. So I wanted to ask, for Poonam, do you think that these are only for new homes, or what are the requirements for the investments? especially like for like retrofits?
Yeah, so, at the end of the day, today, when we look at the demand for energy within the utilities, that demand for energy has increased significantly over the last 2 years. And so while homes contribute towards 20% of the greenhouse gas, the energy prices have been continuously increasing. And so for us to really accelerate the energy transition, it's important that we look at the homes that are already built versus only new builds, right? We have almost 80% of the homes today that are built before 1980. We have 40 million homes today that are having electrical infrastructure in the homes that are not necessarily ready to be more, to consume more of the electrification, right? So adding EVs, adding heat pumps, so on and so forth. And so it's important and almost a responsibility for us as technology providers to be able to support the upgrade of the infrastructure within the home to enable for this greater electrification. And so no, it cannot be new builds only. It needs to include and incorporate the retrofits. And now, from a consumer perspective, it's almost like I need to know before I can do something. And we are seeing that a large part of the consumers in our surveys, we've seen more than 50% of the consumers, they want to know, how much energy is being consumed within various by the various loads within their homes. And you can only control if you know. So once you know, that's step one. You got to be able to measure the energy consumption within your home. And Schneider's Energy Monitor enables you to do that. Now, in terms of really upgrading the infrastructure, it's not necessarily an all or nothing, right? It can be incremental, starting with something like an energy monitor, and then incrementing from there maybe a smart technology inside the panel to enable you to control the loads within the home itself. Now, from a price point, really that varies depending on the type of infrastructure that you've already got in the home and the type of load that you want to add, whether it be an EV charger, or whether it be a heat pump or a HVAC. It really depends on the type of load you want to add, but it can be anywhere from a $400 to upwards of $3,000. But then there are tons of incentives as well that the utilities are providing for more electrification in the homes.
Yeah, very interesting. When it comes to installing in these homes too, I wonder if it's more, DIY versus pro, if there's sort of any thoughts on that. I don't know if Wolfgang, you could speak to that.
Yeah, of course. We are doing 70 to 80% of our revenue with do-it-yourself customers. So they are able to install the solution very easy at home. Everyone who can change a power socket in the wall, buys that in a Home Depot, can install Shelly's. So that's a big advantage. And as well, coming back to the infrastructure, I think in Europe, in most of the countries, the infrastructure is okay. But if you want to install a central system for energy monitoring per device and per room, you need new wiring. With our devices, and that's what most customers really love, you don't need new wiring at all. You can do this room by room, switch by switch. The functionality of the device stays exactly the same, and that's what customers really love. We know from our data that a typical average Shelly customer starts with 2 devices and then adds 2 devices per year, which is very slow, but step by step they are making their homes smart and monitor the energy, because we saw, as I already said, we saw with the increase of the energy prices, we saw a move from the same device that is not monitoring the energy to the device that is monitoring the energy. It's the same device, just €1 more expensive. It's almost 100% now with energy monitoring. The others are more or less gone. Easy to install, relatively cheap, and with our devices for a couple of €100, you make your whole home smart, including everything. Can go up to a couple of thousand if you have a big villa or whatever. But most of the buildings are old, so the new constructions are not that much, and that's a solution that customers really appreciate. And they have the full cost control as well, doing this step by step and doing this on their own.
Yeah, very good. And of course, whether we're talking about pro or DIY, one of the things we have to consider too is that the stakeholders involved in this, like on the stage, for example, we have both utilities and device manufacturers represented. And so I want to talk a little bit about like partnerships and ecosystem players. Partnerships necessary, and what are the best partnerships to have? Poonam, I'd like you to address that if you could.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and we had great panels this morning. By the way, for those of you that had attended, I think this was also touched on in the morning. That at the end of the day, for the amount of power that we need with the growth in demand, the energy transition needs to be accelerated. And if we try to do this as technologists all by ourselves, this is a slow process. So it is extremely important that as an industry, we work together collaboratively to drive this forward in an accelerated manner. And so partnerships are absolutely important. From a Schneider Electric perspective, we've got various types of partnerships, right? So we co-develop with partners. We also have partners we have invested in, like Qmerit, Energy Sage, Uplight, and they kind of touch across various parts of the value chain. And then we've also partnered with builders, right? So we've got an installation with and a strategic partnership with KB Homes, one of the large US builders, where in California we've installed KB Home partnered with Schneider Electric, with Southern California, as well as with University of California, to drive energy efficient homes, 200 homes in California. And this is with solar in each home, with batteries in each home, as well as a microgrid with a community battery. And they saw almost 40% reduction in energy consumption. They have cumulatively, for the homeowners, saved more than 800 million in revenue because of coming from energy savings. And from a CO2 reduction perspective, it's almost equal to 606,000 gas-powered cars. So together as an industry, when we work together, we can make truly a large impact, both for the consumer as well as for the planet.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's also interesting to know that, you have these partnerships with home builders, but there's also, when it comes to partnerships, there's also solar they can install in these homes too. Wolfgang, could you talk a little bit about the solar angle?
Yes, that is something that is really, really helpful. We have almost with all solar panel producers, we have very close partnerships. Most of them just happened because they picked us, they integrated us in their solution, and they recommend us. And then it starts with the simple monitoring of how much energy is my solar system producing. The homeowner knows that's the energy that I have, and then they make the step-by-step integration afterwards. That's really helpful, and we are considered to be something like the standard for doing this together with solar panel producers in Europe. That's really helpful. But if I can add something to the builders, what we see in Europe, and I don't know if this is the same in the United States, if you have the professional installers, the electricians installing devices, I would today say that 90% of them have no idea how to install something that is smart. 90%. So if you talk to them about something that is smart, if this is Schneider or if this is Shelly, the first thing they say, what, this has an IP address, let's put the old wires. And this is something that we have to break through, where we are investing a lot in training them, in helping them to do that, because they simply don't understand. This will need a generation of new installers with a completely different mindset that are able to do that. So the solar installers, they are miles ahead. The traditional guys, they are really, really behind, and they want to put their 2 or 3 cables in the wall, and that's it.
Yeah, that does beg the question of whether solar installers need to be electricians or if they do not need to be, if that helps with that particular value proposition.
Yeah. I think this is a new business, and that has new people, and they have a new mindset, and that is something that completely changes the setup. So if someone did the same job 40 years long. He says, in 5 years I will retire anyhow. I don't want to learn that. That's too complicated. I might have to come back because something is not working. And that's one of the problems that we see there.
What's funny is I had a great early Christmas present of my HVAC system going out. And so I talked to the technician. I'm like, hey, I'd like to get a smart thermostat. And there should be a rebate from the local utility, right? And he's like, yeah, but you don't want to get a smart thermostat. And it is going to also hurt the life of your system and like all these falsehoods. And I was like, not only could they not do it, but they're actively against it. And that's part of the challenge.
Yeah, very interesting. I also want to get kind of sort of I want to get a view of partnerships from both the utility perspective and the device manufacturer perspective. And so what are some examples of some successful collaborations between utility companies and smart home providers? And I'll lead off with Meghan to answer that.
Well, I'll echo what Poonam said. Just general increases in demand for electricity and energy is really requiring these strategic partnerships. And so an example of one in Texas that was just announced between NRG and Renew Home and Google is going to enable the building of a virtual power plant, or VPP, in Texas. So we're excited about that, but it is really requiring that partnership so that we can scale to make the impact that we need to in Texas specifically. And so from an NRG perspective, we've got the supply management expertise that we bring, as well as our energy brands and customers that we bring to the program. And then from a Google and a Renew Home standpoint, they've got energy management capabilities that we'll be leveraging. So that bundle I had mentioned around the thermostat and doorbell, that's really speaking to customers, getting that adoption. The key is really to get customer engagement so that we've got a scalable, successful VPP. And so that's one example of a partnership.
Yeah, Michael, would you also care to weigh in? I know that that Resideo has a DERMS platform, and that really is very useful to work with utilities. So tell me a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah, so a piece in the puzzle, as Meghan was just describing, is what we call a distributed energy management system, distributed energy resource management system, a DERMS. And what this DERMS is like a software layer and like a team behind the scenes that actually is able to aggregate many different devices, kind of creating a collaboration with the manufacturers of the devices, being able to manage having programs that get to the device to be able to be controlled as part of the events when the utility or the energy company needs to have that energy. So kind of my advice to technology providers here in the audience is, utilities, they don't want to talk to every device manufacturer. And frankly, you guys don't want to have to talk to every utility. It just doesn't scale. So the DERMS provider, the aggregator, maybe a simpler term, is able to be there kind of in the middle, coordinating things. We do stuff in the cloud. We're able to talk to utilities on secure channels. So, look at that as, a pathway if you want to get more of your devices involved in energy management. Speaking of success, though, so I want to bring up a story of, from my wife actually recently. I'm a scientist, so my house has been in demand response events since the beginning of demand response events. And this last year, like a few months ago, she's made a comment that, you haven't been running as many of those mad science experiments making our house really hot this past summer. And really what it wasn't me controlling all these things, it was the utilities are now calling events, less frequently, or at least not as strong as they had in the past. Parks research kind of tells us this too, that when customers leave demand response programs now, it's a diminishing level of people saying, oh, it was because I was uncomfortable. Oh, it was because we had too many events. It's more like they moved out or something else changed. So our data is showing that too, that events are being called, maybe not as long as they used to, or at different times of the day. We kind of learn customer patterns and try to tailor the response to what we can do for that customer. So, I think of it as maybe if you were in a program in the past and was uncomfortable for you, give it a shot again, because a lot has evolved in this space.
I think you hit on something key there, though, which is we've got to make sure we have customer trust, because we have to have the scale to sign up to all these programs to get these devices to meet the challenge that everybody's been talking about. Because remember, decarbonization was a generational challenge when there was flat load growth. Okay, now we've got high load growth and decarbonization targets. So it's really unprecedented. And so in order to get that scale, you got to make sure that that customer is comfortable. You got to make sure it's simple, right? And you have to make sure that you don't break that trust, so you don't have to come back and be like, hey, sorry we botched that a few years ago. Would you like to try it again? Because that is such a hard sell, right? And the solar industry, by the way, is seeing the impacts when customers lose faith in your industry. What do your customer acquisition costs do when that happens? Right, it goes sky high.
Yeah, and we've seen solar basically stall in adoption, and a lot of it has to do with cost, but definitely there's a lot of trust issues with the industry as well. So yeah, it's very interesting. We're seeing also that a lot of people are afraid of losing control with demand response. So that's a big piece of it, and being able to gain their trust is going to be very key to that, and also incentivizing them, because we find that that's really the number one way to get consumers to participate in demand response. But okay, so I want to talk a little bit about, in the last few minutes, the future of smart home energy management. And this is really a hot topic, of course, and I'd like to hear a little bit about, Poonam, what you think about it, but how are advancements in AI, machine learning, and IoT changing the energy market, especially like AI and machine learning?
We heard a lot about that this morning, right? So again, I go back to the number one problem that we got to solve for the consumer, and that is reducing the energy bill. Now, in an ideal state, I would like a climate conscious Greta Thunberg wired to my house that is going to do everything that needs to be done to make me comfortable, to reduce my energy bill, as well as do the right things for the planet, right? That's an ideal state. And I don't think that we are necessarily too far from what that state is. So for instance, in Europe, the Schneider energy monitor, that has AI built in that does energy monitoring, that watches for user behavior, understands my energy consumption, looks at the energy prices, looks at the weather forecast, and does everything that needs to be done in terms of automating the usage within the house. For instance, if the energy prices are low, it will heat up my water heater when the energy prices are low. It will charge my EV when the energy prices are low. And it can also predict user behavior, right, to a certain degree, and allow you to kind of make choices based on your behavior. So there's energy optimization that happens, but then also as your energy, if your energy prices are increasing to a certain degree, there's a potential that you've got an old appliance in the house that may be consuming more energy than it should, and that is an indication that, probably in, a few months from now, my appliance may go down. So it gives you an alert necessarily to tell you, hey, take a look at this, right? So there is a little bit of that predictive piece within that as well. So there's a lot of advancements that AI from an energy management is being done to drive resiliency, to drive sustainability, and to drive efficiency.
Yeah, definitely. It's very interesting, and I think I also want to understand the impact that EVs and new energy management programs such as VPPs might have. Lon, I don't know if you could take that one.
Yeah, well, it depends on the rate of adoption. The utility industry, we're at heart of it infrastructure companies, right? So we own and operate these very complex grids. Duke Energy's grid can wrap around the world 7 times. So just think about the maintenance and the analytics and everything that's required, and then on top of that, throw in extreme weather events or crazy people shooting at substations, right? So it's really hard to manage, and if all of a sudden you're getting a neighborhood and each home has 1 or 2 EVs in a cul-de-sac, Well, that's going to present an issue to that local system. Not, you know, and we're not even talking about the larger, oh, do you have enough energy at this particular time from the bulk power system. So it will take more sophisticated algorithms and AI to be able to balance that and also make sure that you're meeting all the customer needs so that you can co-optimize with all those homes and the local grid. Now, what comes with that is more value streams, though, right? So if the customer can enroll in a more sophisticated program, then I can give them more incentives, either on the front end or continue to do participation rewards, right? So there's always these trade-offs. You can have maybe a simple program that doesn't pay as much, but as you get this adoption, you're going to have to see more sophistication. But again, the positive thing is that usually comes with more compensation, more value.
Great. Well, we're almost at the end of our panel here, but as a quick lightning round, maybe a minute or less for each person, I had a conversation during lunch with a couple of folks from Hunter Industries, Matthew and Jessica, and they brought the question about, how do you, get the consumer to buy into the value of energy management at home, especially if they can't really turn down their energy use, if they need the air conditioner on, they need the lights on, or if they've seen their energy insights once, if they never need to see them again for those same devices. How do you get them to buy into that value? So a minute or less, starting with Poonam.
So I think that, at the end of the day, the consumer, I think the statistics you showed earlier was that, yes, they've tried to do everything. Most of the consumers, more than 50% of the consumers that we have surveyed believe that smart home will help them reduce their energy bills, right? Now, the deployment and the adoption is still low, 16%, as you said, smart thermostats. However, the rate of adoption of that has been the highest in the last couple of years, right? So smart thermostats has increased, as well as energy monitoring has increased over the last couple of years. Now, with that, I think the biggest challenge is for us to enable that adoption, to drive engagement, and to keep the technology really simple, to enable the engagement, right? Because these are not, the consumers are not geeks who are going to constantly be playing with the equipment. They want to set it and forget it and let the equipment kind of take care of everything that needs to be taken care of. And I think that's going to enable us to drive more of that adoption.
Yeah, I can just add that the smart home market is on the edge, not being a geek market anymore. It's mass market. It's on the edge to them. It's not yet there. It's on the edge to the mass market. For the geeks, it was great to spend the whole weekend installing one device, trying out a lot of things, talking to the community. Now I found the solution. I can add something to that's over. And we are still, as an industry, we are still talking too much about technology and not enough about the solution. The customer has a problem. The problem is he wants to live with more convenience, or he wants to save energy. How are we solving this problem? He doesn't care about the product that is behind, and if this is Matter or not Matter or Wi-Fi or Z-Wave or whatever it is, he doesn't care. And this is something that is helping. So to make the products easier, to talk more about the use case and the solution. And the other thing I usually say on the energy side, it must hurt. If it's not hurting, no one will change. As long as the kilowatt hour is 5 cents or 10 cents, no one really looks at the bill. If it's 30 or 40 cents, people look at the bill. And that changes behavior completely. And the last thing is education of the installers. If we are not doing that, and as long as they are behaving like, oh, don't do that, it's really not good, it's not solid enough, then will not change.
I mean, I think we need that interoperability too, because, we just had a really bad experience with smart EV chargers with Enel. A lot of homeowners now just, they're going to have challenges with their charger because the company sort of picked up, and then who can fill in and who can work with the software system. So we have to think about that. But also when you have that consumer that has that app and they're looking, hey, how can I save money? That it pops up, auto-discovers the devices that can enroll in a program that Duke Energy has, automatically, one-click enrollment, they get a bill credit, or whatever else, they get connected to a partner, that can install something. Those are the things that we're going to have to do that helps reduce the amount of dependency you have on price signals hurting them, right? Because we don't want to have that situation happen. And so one of our successful programs is we fix the bill for bill certainty for them if they sign up for a smart device and we drop it and we guarantee those savings. So these are the things we're experimenting on that could get some traction.
And I know we're short on time, so I'll be really quick. Innovation in the market. So a lot of what we've talked about, but also here at the show, the market continues to evolve. So what kind of plans are we offering customers so that they can save money? What kind of tools are we giving them? Understanding their different customer types. Some want to set it and forget it. Some want to really dig into the details. So just continuing to innovate around those offerings so that customers have those options.
I'll kind of play on that. As a technology producer, we really want things to be complex on the utility side, all these options, and then it's up to us to develop the technology so that way we make it really easy for the customer, or it's just doing it automatically. So push for more complexity and the more constraints and options that are out there, but then the interface to the customer needs to be simple.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, panel, for joining us for this. And we have a 20-minute networking break. And then join us later tonight for a networking reception. You can RSVP online or at that QR code there. And thanks again to our sponsors. And then if you want to check out our research, we've got it on our website, but you could also click this QR code. Thank you, everyone, and stay tuned for our next session.